held my breath as I adjusted the veil over my daughter Eva's dark hair, smoothing the silk as though each fold could erase the knots in my stomach. The garden shimmered with white roses, golden ribbons, and crystal lanterns swaying gently in the breeze. Guests were settling into their seats, cameras ready, waiting for the perfect wedding that I had paid for, down to the last spoonful of catered dessert. It should have been a day of pride. Instead, I heard his voice, Hector, my soon-to-be son-in-law, pacing just beyond the hallway arch, speaking in a low tone to one of his groomsmen. "If she doesn't respect my mother, she can disappear." The words sliced through me, as if he'd pulled the veil from my own head and left me bare before the world. 5 years since my husband's death. 5 years of shouldering bills, tuition, down payments, credit card emergencies, and to him, I was nothing but a nuisance. The old burden. My hands trembled, but I did not let go of the veil. Eva's face beamed at me in the mirror, unaware of the venom spilling from the man she was about to vow her life to. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat and reached into my handbag. The cool weight of my phone steadied me. With a practiced flick, I opened the recorder app and let it capture every syllable that followed. I wasn't sure why I did it. Self-defense, instinct, maybe survival. Years of teaching mathematics had trained me to record facts. Keep proof. Show the equation in black and white. Now, I had an equation of my own, $45,000 in flowers, $18,000 for Eva's gown, $80,000 for the banquet, all balanced against Hector's single sentence that branded me disposable. Eva twirled once before the mirror, the veil floating like a cloud around her. "Is it perfect?" "Mama," she asked, her voice light and trusting. "Yes, darling," I whispered, forcing the corners of my lips into a smile. "It's perfect." She didn't see the storm inside me, nor the quiet resolve hardening beneath my ribs. I kissed her cheek, inhaled the faint scent of roses and hairspray, and anchored the veil with a final pin. The music swelled outside. Guests rose. The ceremony was about to begin. I slipped my phone back into my bag, the recording safe, a silent ally I hadn't known I would need. As I took Ava's hand to guide her toward the aisle, my smile held steady. Yet inside, a different vow formed. One meant for myself alone. This old burden would not disappear. Not today. Not ever. And as the first notes of the wedding march echoed across the garden, I knew the tape in my bag was only the beginning. That night, when the last of the champagne glasses had been cleared and the rented lights from the garden wedding faded into darkness, I sat at my kitchen table with the old leather-bound ledger spread before me. Its pages, yellowed at the edges, smelled faintly of ink and dust. Line after line of numbers stretched back 5 years, each one telling a story that nobody but me seemed to remember. Every month since Ricardo died, my pension came in $15,000, and every month, like clockwork, $8,000 went directly into Eva's account. I was left with $7 to stretch across groceries, utilities, medical prescriptions, and the crumbling roof over my head. Beans and rice, worn-out shoes, and dresses mended more times than I could count. That was my life, so that hers could shine. My fingers traced the entries as memories unfurled, tutoring students in algebra late into the night just to cover the down payment on her first apartment, patching shingles in the dead of winter because hiring help was a luxury, paying off the nursing school tuition when the loans she promised to manage grew too heavy, car repairs, dentist bills, graduation gowns, all logged here. Each receipt tucked neatly between the pages, my sacrifices cataloged in black and white. I closed my eyes and remembered Ava's smile the day she passed her licensing exam. She had hugged me with real gratitude then. That memory softened me, if only for a moment. But the echo of Hector's voice at the wedding, "If she doesn't respect my mother, she can disappear," crashed against that tenderness like a wave against rock. And Consuelo, standing tall at the banquet table, accepting praise for Hector's taste in flowers and music, while the guests clapped politely for his choices. Not one mention that it was my hands that wrote the checks, my years that funded their dream. I had been invisible, a ghost carrying a wallet. I snapped the ledger shut. The sound startled me in the quiet kitchen, as final as the crack of a gavel. For decades I had been their silent financier, the steady current beneath their glittering lives. Tonight, staring at the neat columns of sacrifice, I felt something new stir inside me. I was not just a giver. I was a creditor with a bill long overdue, and the collection would begin sooner than they expected. The three-tiered cake gleamed under the strings of golden lights, its sugar roses as delicate as the real ones lining the garden. I stood at the edge of the crowd, envelopes pressed against my chest, ready to hand them over to the new couple. Guests smiled. Laughter rippled. The photographer circled with his lens flashing like starlight. It should have been a moment of joy, of blessing. Then Hector leaned toward his friend, his voice meant for no one else. "Now that we're married, we won't have to put up with the old woman meddling." The words cut deeper than any knife slicing through the cake. I was standing directly behind him, so close I could smell the champagne on his breath. The ink of his suit still new. He didn't know I heard, or maybe he didn't care. Either way, the insult landed like a final verdict. My hands tightened around the stack of envelopes. Tradition said the mother of the bride delivered them to the couple, a gesture of blessing from family and friends. But tradition had been my prison for too long. Smiling faintly, I slipped the envelopes into my purse. The movement smooth, practiced, unnoticed. My pulse thudded in my ears, yet my expression never faltered. Guests cheered as Hector fed Eva a piece of cake, smearing a dot of frosting on her nose. Flashbulbs popped, capturing his grin, her laughter. Behind them, the night sky erupted in fireworks, fiery blooms of color paid entirely from my account. The crowd gasped and clapped, praising Hector's taste, his generosity. No one turned to look at me, the woman whose savings were burning bright above their heads. Later, when the noise had died down and the music softened, I slipped away to a quiet corner. My hands trembled as I opened my purse and counted the envelopes. $12,500. I felt the weight of it settle into my lap, not just paper, but proof. Power, possibility, the insult, the erasure, the endless years of silence. This was the last straw. Those envelopes were no longer a gift. They were the seed of a new beginning. One I would water with every no I had swallowed for too long. By the time the final spark of fireworks faded from the sky, my decision was already made. Morning light streamed through the kitchen window as I scrubbed the last of the dishes from the night before. My apron was damp, the smell of soap clinging to my hands. When the phone buzzed on the counter, Ava's name glowed across the screen. "Mom," she began, her tone brisk, almost hurried. "Can you confirm the honeymoon transfer, $35,000? The travel agent needs it today." Water dripped from my hands as I reached for the towel, each word from her mouth pressing against me like a demand already fulfilled. For years, I had answered without hesitation, "Yes, of course. Don't worry." But this time, with the memory of Hector's sneer still burning in my ears and the weight of those envelopes heavy in my purse, something shifted. I pressed the phone to my ear and spoke the smallest, yet most powerful word in my vocabulary. No. Silence crackled through the line. Then Ava stammered, her voice cracking. Well, what do you mean? No, behind her. Hector's voice flared, sharp and furious, though I couldn't catch the words. I mean no, I repeated evenly, drying my hands. My chest felt strangely light, as if years of burden had loosened with that single syllable. After the call ended in a storm of disbelief, I carried my resolve to the desk where my computer waited. Fingers steady, I logged into the bank. I canceled the automatic transfers, froze the extra credit cards, and removed Ava's access from the account. Each click was a door closing, a lock snapping shut, and with every step, I felt my pulse calm, my breath deepen. For the first time since Ricardo died, the numbers on the screen belonged only to me. At noon, I packed a small bag. Into it went the envelopes of cash, the phone holding Hector's cruel words, and a notebook filled with receipts. I locked the door behind me, slid into my car, and pointed it west. Carmen's cottage in Oregon waited, a place where I could think, away from their demands. By the time the highway opened before me, I knew there was no turning back. Carmen's cottage smelled faintly of cedar and ocean salt, a refuge where the air itself seemed lighter. I settled into the small guest room, spreading my papers across the desk to bring some order to the chaos I had carried with me. Bills, receipts, and notes from years of careful accounting lay in tidy stacks. But one envelope slipped loose from the pile. The bank logo printed on the corner was unfamiliar, curious. I unfolded the letter and felt my stomach twist. A credit line in my name, opened months ago. My eyes scanned the details: luxury department stores, Parisian boutiques, online orders labeled as emergency expenses. The total balance was staggering. I turned the page and froze. The signature, my name, written in Ava's hand. She hadn't even bothered to disguise it fully, as if confident I would never discover the theft. Hector's insults had stung, but this betrayal cut deeper. My daughter had not only drained me for years, she had stolen my name, my identity, to fund her indulgences. The weight of every sacrifice I had made for her pressed hard against my chest until my breath grew shallow. For a long while I sat still, staring at the ink that betrayed me. Then, with a deliberate calm I didn't recognize in myself, I opened my notebook and began to document. I recorded the account numbers, the balances, each date and purchase. I photocopied the letter, tucked the copy safely into a separate folder, and wrote a clear heading across the page: forgery. The kindness I had mistaken for love revealed itself now as manipulation, a pattern I had ignored for too long. My daughter's smile, her embraces, her casual words of gratitude all suddenly rang hollow. But I would not confront her. Not yet. Silence was a sharper weapon than outrage. Let them believe I was still the same obedient source of money. Let them rest easy, unaware that I was watching, recording, gathering every strand of evidence. I closed the folder and slipped it into my bag. The ocean roared faintly beyond the window, steady, relentless, just as I intended to be. The real reckoning had only begun. By the time Eva and Hector reached O'Hare, I was already back in my kitchen, the kettle hissing softly as steam curled toward the ceiling. Their Paris flight had been circled on the calendar for weeks, a reminder of yet another sacrifice I was expected to make. But now, as I poured hot water over a sachet of chamomile, the burden was no longer mine to carry. My phone began to vibrate on the counter just as I sat down with the mug between my hands. First once, then again, then in frantic bursts, the screen flashing Ava's name. I let it buzz against the wood, until the sound became part of the room. Like the ticking clock on the wall, I pictured them at the check-in desk, passports ready, expecting everything to be smoothed over as it always had been. I imagined the agent's polite but firm explanation tickets unpaid. Reservation canceled. Hector's face flushing red. Ava's voice rising in panic. Their outrage would be loud enough to echo through the terminal, yet powerless against the silence of a frozen account. The phone rang again. This time, I heard Ava's voice through the voicemail, sharp and panicked. "We're stranded. You ruined everything. How could you do this to us?" behind her. Hector shouted something about humiliation. I sipped my tea, the taste calm and earthy, and turned my attention to the little row of succulents lined up on the windowsill. I tipped a pitcher carefully, letting drops sink into the dry soil. By evening, the calls grew fewer, their fury worn down by exhaustion. I pictured them leaving the airport with their luggage still intact. No tickets, no champagne toasts in the sky, just the long ride home in silence. Later, in the quiet of my bedroom, I opened my diary and pressed the pen hard into the page. If they wanted me gone, I'll show them how empty life feels without my invisible scaffolding. I underlined the words twice before closing the book. The hum of the night settled around me, steady and certain, and I knew the next move was already taking shape. 3 days passed before the knock rattled my front door. It wasn't a gentle knock, but a furious pounding, the kind that carries accusation before a word is spoken. When I opened it, Eva stormed in, her face flushed and her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You embarrassed us," she shouted, dropping her purse onto the chair as though the house itself belonged to her. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? Hector's friends? His mother? Everyone thinks we can't even pay for our own honeymoon. You've ruined us." I listened without a word, letting her anger fill the room like smoke. Then I turned, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a plain manila folder. I laid it flat on the kitchen table and opened it slowly, as if unveiling nothing more than an old recipe. Inside lay the title deed to this house, my name written clearly across the lines that mattered. Eva's voice faltered. "What is this?" "The truth," I answered, sliding the papers toward her. "You've lived here, decorated, hosted, even called it your own. But you never asked who signs the taxes. You only assumed." Her cheeks drained of color as she scanned the page. She had believed the house was a wedding gift, a foundation to build her life upon. Now she realized the ground beneath her feet was never hers to claim. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scold. I simply watched her read until she couldn't anymore. Then, with the same steady hands that had held her veil days earlier, I slid the deed back into the folder and tucked it away. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly in a drawer, stamped and notarized, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Eva sat, speechless, her outrage silenced not by argument, but by fact. I poured myself a glass of water, the silence between us heavier than any lecture I could have given. When she finally rose to leave, she avoided my eyes. The door clicked shut behind her, and in the stillness that followed, I began gathering the rest of my records. By the end of the month, the silence from Eva grew heavier than her angry words had ever been. When she finally appeared at my door, she looked smaller somehow, her eyes red and swollen, shoulders bent beneath the weight of something she couldn't name. Behind her absence, I already knew the story. Hector had slipped back into his mother's cramped duplex, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. She sat at my kitchen table without ceremony, her hands trembling against the wood. "We're behind on rent," she whispered. "The landlord's threatening to evict me. I don't know what to do. I studied her. The child I had once carried on my hip, now reduced to pleading. Part of me longed to comfort her, but the other part, the part that had been dismissed, insulted, and drained, held steady. I rose, walked to the cabinet, and pulled down an old shoebox wrapped in faded paper. I set it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were stacks of folded receipts, organized and dated in my careful hand. Eva frowned, confused, until I began laying them out. The dentist bill from when she cracked a tooth, the tuition statement from nursing school, the repair for her car's transmission, grocery bills from the times she and Hector came over empty-handed, yet left with bags full. 5 years, I said flatly, my voice even $500,000, not a gift. Eva, a ledger of debts. She covered her face with both hands, sobs breaking through her fingers. I felt no triumph, no cruelty in watching her weep. What I felt was release, as though chains I had worn for years had quietly slipped away. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, the only other sound in the room. I gathered the receipts back into the box, returned it to the cabinet, and closed the door gently. When I turned, Eva was still crying, her tears staining the silence between us. I poured myself a glass of water, sat across from her, and waited for the storm inside her to pass. Something told me this was only the beginning of her reckoning. Eva's sobs softened into words. Please, Mom, help us one more time. Her voice cracked with the same pleading tone I'd heard since she was a teenager. Only now it carried the weight of desperation instead of entitlement. I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. If you want my help, there will be rules. Her eyes widened, but I continued, my voice calm, deliberate. First, ask respectfully, not as if it's owed. Second, take initiative before coming to me. Solve what you can on your own. Third, include me in things I enjoy, not only when you need my wallet. And fourth, show gratitude consistently, not just in crisis. Eva nodded quickly, too quickly, as if agreement were enough. Hector, who had lingered silent near the door, finally muttered, I'm sorry, Doña Mari. The words sounded stiff, a script rehearsed under pressure. I looked at them both, my face unreadable. Promises were air, and I'd learned to measure only actions. We'll see, I said simply. The room grew quiet, the rules hanging between us like a contract. I knew then that respect had to be taught, line by line, and I had just written the opening terms. I kept the envelopes, the canceled transfers, every dollar I had salvaged from years of sacrifice. For the first time in decades, I used the money for myself. Carmen helped me find a small beach cottage along the Oregon coast, its porch facing the endless sweep of the Pacific. Each morning, I woke to the sound of waves instead of demands. I slipped on the red blouse I had hidden in the back of my closet for years, no longer ashamed of standing out, with brushes and paint spread across the porch. I filled canvas after canvas with wildflowers and saltwater skies. I cooked simple meals just for myself, seasoning them exactly as I liked, and laughed with Carmen until the gulls startled from the shore. One evening, the phone rang. Eva's voice was hesitant, almost fragile. Mom, I want to visit, not for money, just to spend time. I held the receiver, the ocean breeze tangling through my hair, and smiled. Boundaries now guarded me. Not walls of anger, but fences of peace. Love without respect is exploitation. Respect without gratitude is emptiness. I choose both, or I choose myself,